Hi there guys, Ben here. John asked me to make a contribution to this video he was putting together, something about our slide guitarist ripping us off. So I've got a couple of top tips for you. The first one pertaining to the slide itself. I think it's useful to get a slide that is balanced to the weight of your action. When we first start playing, generally we have those very thin wall metal slides. And just as an observation, I find that with those things, because they don't have a lot of mass, when the string vibrates, the slide tends to want to jump off a little bit. So we end up pressing harder, and to offset that, you end up having to have a heavier gauge of strings and a higher action. So a lot of guys have guitars that are set specifically for slide. Well, I don't want to do that. I just want to whip it out and slide it in whenever I want, and why wouldn't you? So if I'm in the middle of a function band set, I still want to be able to play slide. I don't get a lot of callbacks on those things, actually. But get a slide that has a thick wall to it and a good amount of mass, but not so much that it's basically just going to fret out. By the way, John told me to tell you that he's an idiot. Genuinely, he told me that. I can prove it. I've got it in a message. He didn't realize that you're supposed to touch the string hard enough to get the note to come out, but not so hard that it's going to fret out. He said that was not obvious. But that is the whole deal with slide, is getting the feel and a setup that allows you to make a positive connection with the string, but not a positive connection with the note with the fret. My action is what I would classify as a medium action with 11s on it, and you don't really need much more than that if you've got the right weight slide. So something with a thick wall, I think, gives you a thicker tone. That's purely anecdotal. There's no science behind that. But I like these ceramic ones, not least because they're sort of porous on the inside. The blues bottle glass ones with the closed top make my hands sweat. Kind of disgustingly, I have water trickling down the side of my finger after little more than a song. So the ceramic ones are pretty good. The sizing is awful on them. You'll just have to keep buying them until you find one that fits, because the mediums can come up bigger than the large, and it's just all over the place. But I do like the tone. It's somewhere in between glass and brass. Hopefully this is nice and clear. It's a little bit tricky to film this. I want to show you this right-hand damping technique. So to start with, I would recommend playing everything with the first finger. So you're going to put that down. In this case, I'm going to put it on the D string. And then you put your thumb on the string directly below it. And I'm leaning it down. And that's damping both the A and the E. And then my other fingers are one finger per string on all of the notes that are directly above the one I'm playing with, which is this one right here. And so when I lift my first finger, these other strings will be completely muted, and only the string that I had my first finger on will be making noise. So only the D rings out there. And the reason is obviously because I've got all of my other fingers on the adjacent strings and my thumb on the ones below and leaning on that E. So that's how you would play everything. Now, of course, you're not going to think of all of those fingers independently. That would be ridiculous. But if you can hold that form exactly like it is there, and then plonk, for instance, the first finger down on the G, like that, now my thumb is resting on the D and is leaning across both the A and the E, and then these fingers here are sort of curled, but hopefully this is clear, are curled underneath my hand, and I'm muting those strings there. So again, if I bring up the first finger, now only the G makes a noise because everything else is muted. So you just get used to plonking your whole hand down on the strings that you wish to make a noise. If I want to go for the B, my thumb is now on the G and is leaning on most of the set of strings. And I've got all of these three actually holding onto the E here. So if I bring up the first finger, again, only the B rings out. If you can get it to that point, then you're obviously going to be away at the races for playing slide. Now, obviously, you're going to free this technique up a little bit as you get better, and you'll be able to play, notes of melody with some of these other fingers as well. But to start with, I really recommend trying to play everything with the first finger. I think it'll just make your damping a lot easier. The sound itself is a big deal for playing slide. Now, I removed some low end when I went to mix my little bit of playing there. But in the room, I generally have quite an amount of low end and low mid. I find it's easier to play on, and you'll also want some degree of compression in your sound. That doesn't mean to say that you actually have to use a compressor, but having a stacked gain, I mean, I'm using a Marshall SV20 back here. I'm on the normal channel, which is kind of unusual. That's what I like. But I've got the gain at about maybe 1 o'clock, something like that. I've also got my small fry burn unit, which has got a sort of a reverse compression. It's called dynamics. I've got that down about 9 o'clock and also a good amount of gain in it. I've got that set at about 2 o'clock. So I've got gain on gain and quite squishy gain at that. So I don't need a compressor as well. But you'll need some amount of compression in the signal path unless you've got a really high action and really heavy strings, because, you know, the pedal steel guys, again, you know, they have super, super clean sounds, but they can afford to do that because of how high the action is. So it's all a compromise between the weight of the action, the weight of the slide, and how much squish, low end, mid-range, all that kind of stuff you've got going on in your sound. I'd also recommend rolling the top back just a little bit, because having the slide moving backwards and forwards on the wound strings is kind of like nails on a blackboard. It's not a pretty sound. So you can negate that by just simply turning the tone down a little bit. So there's another thing I want to show you here is that when a lot of guys start playing, they tend to play with the middle of the bar. So say you were targeting this note right here, you wouldn't play that with the middle of your finger. You'd play it with the tip because you'd have more control over it. So imagine that you're playing with the tip of your finger, but inside the bar. And that's probably going to mean that instead of going across the whole neck like this, you're actually going to move the bar down towards the note that you're targeting. But I think that if you're thinking about playing with the tip, you're going to have more control over how much pressure you're exerting on the string, and that will stop it fretting out. I just want to say there is no right or wrong with any technique, but a friend of mine sent me a video of him playing slide the other day and asked whether slanting the bar was allowed. You know, should you do that? Well, there are pedal steel techniques and things where they do slant the bar to get certain chord voicing, certainly on table steel where you can't move the notes around. I think I do slant the bar slightly because that's just what's comfortable. It's not that comfortable to hold it completely square to the fret. But there's no right and wrong. If I give you the example of Dave Hole, he actually plays with the slide on the first finger. And you're sort of thinking, well, how does that work? Well, he plays his chords with these three, and then when he wants to play slide, he puts it over the top like this, and then kind of anchors off these two strings, two fingers here, and then does this kind of motion, which feels really alien to me. But it works for him. And the limitations have become part of his style. And in fact, there might be things that he can do that I wouldn't be able to pull off. He would be able to play notes on the lower strings whilst leaving these higher strings ringing on, which would be incredibly difficult this way up because the fleshy part of your hand would be muting these top strings. So immediately you've got something that is going to be unique to you because it's a unique technique. So there is no right and wrong, and don't get too hung up on that. It's only bad technique if it's causing some kind of a limitation. If there's something you can't do because of it, then maybe you have to change something. But also look at what it's giving you, because it might be that you get your entire style based on that limitation. Thanks for having me on your channel, John. I appreciate it. I love you, JHS. You're amazing. And yeah, see you guys again later.